IAS 38 deals with intangible asset. So first of all, the definition of intangible asset. An intangible asset is an identifiable non-monetary asset without physical substance. So the identifiability is an important criteria, that it is a separate item, it is separable from other assets. And as far as asset definition is concerned, an asset is a resource which is controlled by an entity as a result of past event. So these are the few examples of intangible assets. For example, you can see that computer softwares, database, trade secrets, trademarks, internet domains, customer list, licensing, quotas, franchise agreements, so and so on. Now, how to account for these intangible assets? Before that, intangible assets can be acquired through a separate purchase, in which case it's a purchase intangible asset. You might get an intangible asset as part of a business combination. Similarly, you might get some license by way of government grant. If you can get an intangible asset through an exchange of one asset with another, and intangible asset might be self-generated, that is the internally generated intangible asset. Now, as far as the recognition criteria is concerned, under IAS 38, an asset is to be recognized whether purchased or self-created at cost if and only if it is probable that the future economic benefit will flow to the entity, and the cost of the asset can be reliably measured. Now, this criteria is particularly relevant for the purchased item. For internally generated items, some additional recognition criteria needs to be satisfied in order to recognize them in balance sheet. Now, as far as the initial recognition of purchased items are concerned, so after initial recognition, the purchased intangible asset is to be measured at cost. What is cost? How you can identify cost? The cost is purchase price plus all directly attributable cost, directly incurred cost related to acquisition. Now, as far as the subsequent measurement is concerned, there are two choices. Either cost model can be used or revaluation model can be used for each class of intangible asset. So for one class, you can use cost model. For another class, you can use revaluation model. As far as cost model is there, after initial recognition, intangible asset should be carried at original cost minus the accumulated amortization if that asset is subject to amortization, and impairment losses under IAS 36, that is the book value. And if revaluation is possible, then intangible asset may be carried at revalued amount based on fair value minus any subsequent amortization and impairment losses, provided that fair value can be determined by reference to an active market. This is very important. For an intangible asset revaluation criteria, the fair value must be determined through an active market, and such active markets are uncommon for intangible assets, because mostly the intangible assets are unique and they are not selling in any specific market. The examples where you can find the fair value of an intangible asset, it's simply production quotas in case of fishing licenses and taxi licenses. These are a few examples. But if you opt for revaluation model and it is possible that fair value is identified through an active market, then under the revaluation model, revaluation increase. If the value of asset increases, then revaluation surplus arises and it is to be recognized in other comprehensive income as an unrealized gain and accumulated in the balance sheet under the heading revaluation surplus within equity, except to the extent that they reverse a revaluation decrease previously recognized in profit and loss account. So it means that the normal treatment of revaluation surplus is that if revaluation surplus arises first time, then we can record it in OCI. But if there is a revaluation deficit previously recognized in profit and loss account, and subsequently we have revaluation of 150, then first of all we have to adjust our deficit and we have to credit it in profit and loss account, and then excess revaluation surplus is to be recognized in other comprehensive income. If the value revalued intangible asset has a definite useful life and is therefore being amortized, the revalued amount is amortized. The intangible asset on the basis of useful life can be classified into two types, one having an indefinite useful life and other having a finite life. So in case of an indefinite useful life, for those assets, intangible asset with definite useful life, the cost minus residual value of an intangible asset should be amortized on a systematic basis over that lives. The amortization method should reflect the pattern of economic benefit, and if such pattern cannot be determined reliably, which is mostly the case, then amortize it by the straight line method. That is the available method. If there is an amortization, it is charged in profit and loss account, but sometimes the amortization might be capitalized in another asset. The amortization period should be reviewed at least annually. So at each year end, you have to reassess your amortization period, the life, and adjust accordingly. Now, as far as the measurement subsequent to acquisition, intangible asset with indefinite useful life is concerned, an intangible asset with an indefinite useful life should not be amortized. Its useful life should be reviewed each reporting period to determine whether events and circumstances continue to support an indefinite life assessment. If they do not, the change in useful life assessment from indefinite to definite should be accounted for as a change in accounting estimate under IAS 8. And the asset with an indefinite useful life, such asset should be assessed for impairment in accordance with IAS 36. And IAS 36 says that annual impairment testing is needed for such kind of assets. Regular annual impairment testing is required.